This is going to be our initial reaction to Los Angeles going out there and signing Allen Robinson. Now, Allen Robinson's been a player that I've been saying, you know what? I am off of A-Rob. I am going to be selling Allen Robinson low after a disappointing season. We'll talk about why in just a second. But maybe I'm feeling just a little bit burnt because I went out there and, of course, drafted him pretty much everywhere that I could back in 2021. We know how that panned out. But before we get into anything, I have a couple exciting announcements. A, we got a new camera / lens, so please let me know if you think this looks any better than usual. And B, more importantly, it's all done. We have finished our in-depth Dynasty research book for the 2022 offseason. Spent me probably a couple months of my time and probably way too many relationships go into this book, sacrificed by yours truly, and I hope that y'all are going to enjoy it. I will have information on how y'all can access this book just probably in a week. Latest a week, hopefully by this weekend. But please make sure you go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Let me know your opinions. And before we get into anything, let me pull up the official details of this Allen Robinson deal because, as I said, this was an initial reaction. I mean, here, JN texted me, Allen Robinson signed. I was walking to the gym. I went, okay, well, it looks like we got to turn back around. And let me see if I can figure this out. Okay, so this is a 3-year, $45 million deal that includes, more importantly, this is what we always talk about, guaranteed money. That's what we need. $30 million guaranteed. Okay, so with this in mind, we have to look at the investment this team puts into Allen Robinson, indicating that they most likely don't have expectations for Robert Woods to make a meaningful impact upon return. Now, of course, Robert Woods will still be a player coming back from this injury, but it happened at the very end of the season, which is something that I want to point out. And if you look at that Robert Woods contract in particular, let me pull it up now. Now, Robert Woods, I'd be very surprised if they decided to move on from him this offseason. Now, that's not to say that Robert Woods is guaranteed to be on the Los Angeles Rams beyond 2022. I mean, if we're looking at this deal, yeah, he signed pretty large extension himself. Robert Woods signed a 4-year, $65 million contract not too long ago with $32 million guaranteed. Keep in mind, the guaranteed money. This is the number one thing that we need to be looking at. And if we're looking at this Robert Woods contract, he has $12 million guaranteed this season. Now, Spotrac is saying that he is cuttable. They're saying that they can move on from him. I don't know how they're getting to that conclusion because if I'm looking at it, hell, I mean, they can save $3.6 million from moving on from Robert Woods. Robert Woods is not worth cutting for $3.5 million. Clearly, Robert Woods still one of the better receivers in the NFL. Robert Woods is most likely a lock for this roster this upcoming season. However, in 2023, it gets to be a point where they could save $10 million by moving on from Robert Woods, and he'll be a 31-year-old wide receiver in 2023. So I think this probably puts the mark on Robert Woods that he has 1 year left in Los Angeles, unless he comes out and he puts up a 2020 season from what we had with Robert Woods. Remember, coming into the year, a lot of people, including myself, I thought Robert Woods was the wide receiver 1A. Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 1B on this team. Now, I see someone in the chat saying, okay, well, does Cooper Kupp go down? What the hell are we talking about here? Let me remind y'all the type of season Cooper Kupp just put up. I'm not going to even be looking at the playoffs. If we want to go through his playoff statistics on there, Cooper Kupp put over 2,000 receiving yards on the board. If you're looking at a points per game basis, Cooper Kupp averaged 26 points per game in weeks 1 through 16 this past year. If we want to look at that in terms of its historical significance, we go back to 2020. The only receiver that was able to get to that mark was Davante Adams. We go back to 2019. Remember, Michael Thomas breaking records this 2019 season, wasn't able to come anything close to the season that Cooper Kupp did from a fantasy football perspective. Kupp dominated with his target share, even with the addition of Odell Beckham Jr. near the end of the season. Cooper Kupp didn't lose a beat. Odell just had the red zone usage, and I think maybe that's what we can expect from Allen Robinson going forward in Los Angeles. So Cooper Kupp is still the wide receiver 1. It's not even remotely close in fantasy overall. Of course, he's the wide receiver 1 on the Rams. Nobody needs to say that, but he is the wide receiver 1 overall still in fantasy for 2022. Dynasty is a little bit of a different story, obviously, given his age, given Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson with their long-term outlooks as well. But now if we move over to Allen Robinson in particular, let me explain why I am going to be lower on Allen Robinson than most other people. And I know because this is an Allen Robinson video, we probably got a lot of Allen Robinson fans watching this, a lot of people excited. And I will say, this is one of Allen Robinson's best possible landing spots, 100%. I mean, going to an offense that the majority of the attention is going to have to be, just focused in on Cooper Kupp in particular, going to an offense with Sean McVay that, Sean McVay is the complete opposite of Matt Nagy. I know everybody wants to go out there and blame Matt Nagy for the failure of Justin Fields, for the failure of Allen Robinson. Matt Nagy is just the scapegoat being used for this entire Chicago Bears situation, and I think it's a little unfair to do that. Of course, he deserves a ton of the blame, but he's not the only thing that went wrong in Chicago this past season. It's never as simple as that. If it was as simple as that, trust me, teams would not hire bad coaches. Bad coaches would not have a job that long. But if we pull up Allen Robinson, I want to play a little game with y'all. Let's look at points per game this past year. And I'm going to ask you, who had more points per game with these receivers? Put them in order. Allen Robinson, Khalif Raymond, Byron Pringle, Allen Lazard, Robbie Anderson, Mecole Hardman, Randall Cobb, Laviska Shenault, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Who had more points per game than Allen Robinson on that list? And I know this is not everything. We are going to continue to dive into this, but just as a starting point so we can understand what Allen Robinson did last season, because obviously we know he failed. But out of that list, who was able to outscore Allen Robinson on a points per game basis in weeks 1 through 16 last year? Khalif Raymond, Byron Pringle, Allen Lazard, Robbie Anderson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rondale Moore, Mecole Hardman, Randall Cobb. All of them, 100% of the receivers on that list outscored Allen Robinson last year. Now, of course, Allen Robinson was placed into a very bad situation. He was placed into a situation where he was destined to fail. Matt Nagy was not a good NFL coach by any stretch of the imagination. If you're watching this video, you know my opinion on Justin Fields. I think that Justin Fields has been overvalued for a very long time. So I am not sitting here saying Allen Robinson is a worse receiver than Khalif Raymond. Of course, I can't say that. You could paint a little red nose on me and just call me a clown over and over again if I ever try to come out here with that take. That's why, if you go pull up my Dynasty rankings, I have Allen Robinson ranked ahead of every single one of those receivers. Of course I do. But just to get that baseline, to understand where he was, and what's great with Allen Robinson as well, if we were looking at his production last year, we have another receiver that we can actually look at in that same exact offense with the same exact head coach and quarterback play throughout the entire season. We can go over to Darnell Mooney. And with Darnell Mooney, I'm not even a massive fan of Mooney, but he finishes, leaps and bounds ahead of Allen Robinson. The wide receiver 37 compared to Allen Robinson, down there closer to the wide receiver 90. With Allen Robinson, if you're looking at his stat line, nothing about this shows that he was anything special last season. Even if we're looking at the targets, he had one game with more than 7 targets, and that was in week 1. That was one game. If you're looking at Allen Robinson with games more than 11 points scored, he had 0 games with 11 or more points scored. 0 games. And if we compare this to Darnell Mooney, who is in that same exact situation, Darnell Mooney, we count him out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 games through the first 15 weeks. So this is not to say that Allen Robinson is a bum because he didn't put up points last year, because we can go back to 2015. We can go back to 2019. 2019 even, Allen Robinson was a fantastic receiver in a very bad situation. This will be by far and away the best quarterback play that Allen Robinson has ever had in his NFL career. And Allen Robinson before has been a top 5 dynasty receiver. I mean, if y'all remember, Allen Robinson was a round 1 startup pick, and I was drafting him back in the days where he was just stacking up garbage time production with Blake Bortles in the 4th quarter in Jacksonville back in 2015, 2016. That time period, he was at the very top of dynasty draft boards. Now, I think this is a mistake that I most likely would have made in the past. I think that I probably would have been too excited about the receiver going to a better situation that we previously perceived to be an elite talent, thinking that he still had that talent level and that was going to be able to be shown in the much improved offense. Well, yes, it's true. Allen Robinson will be better next year than he was this past season. Allen Robinson, even if he were to come out and double his points per game, if he went from 7.3 to 14.6, he's a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2. He's having to compete with the best receiver in the NFL. And yes, opposing defensive backs, opposing defensive coordinators are going to have to spend a ton of their resources, a ton of attention on Cooper Kupp, and that will increase the efficiency of Allen Robinson on a per target basis. Of course, that's the case. But at the end of the day, his target share will go down at the same time. Robert Woods, as we discussed at the beginning of this video, looking at the Robert Woods contract, he will be on this team next year. Van Jefferson, drafted in 2020 in the 2nd round, he will be on this team next year. This clearly shows, Odell Beckham Jr., who suffered that injury during the Super Bowl, even if he were to resign, he wouldn't be ready until about week 10 anyway. Odell's probably leaving Los Angeles here. But with Allen Robinson, I am probably using this as a sell high point. This is what we talked about previously, saying if you had Allen Robinson, I don't really think we need to sell him before free agency, because the second that he signs somewhere, there are going to be people hyping Allen Robinson up. And I can understand why. Let's go back to 2019. With Allen Robinson in 2019 in a very bad offense, he was a top 10 receiver. He went out there and, dominated. I believe that was with an entire season of Mitchell Trubisky. I just don't know if I can get behind it. He's going to be 29 this upcoming year. Now, let me pull up my actual dynasty rankings to kind of hypothesize where I'll be moving Allen Robinson after this update. And real quick, if you actually go to the description of this video, you can find the link over there to Locals. And on Locals, these rankings are going to be free until Sunday, because y'all have been smashing that like button. Of course, thank you so much. Okay, so let me see where I have him now. And I'm going to have Allen Robinson ranked lower than pretty much anybody else that you're listening to. So I have Allen Robinson ranked directly behind the combination of Michael Gallup, Gabriel Davis, George Pickens, and David Bell. I have him ranked ahead of Adam Thielen, Odell Beckham Jr., and Rondale Moore. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Mason, you're an idiot. Why do you have him ranked that low? Rondale Moore outscored him on a points per game basis last year, and Rondale Moore was a rookie. Okay, and I still already had Allen Robinson ranked ahead of Rondale Moore. So if we put it in that context, I don't think I'm that low on Allen Robinson. I've made the mistakes in the past going out there and paying the name price for Sammy Watkins just because, oh, it was Sammy Watkins. Funny that they were in the same draft class, of course. But how high do we have to move Allen Robinson? I think we definitely have to rethink this, in that we have Robert Woods ranked ahead of Allen Robinson, and with this commitment into Allen Robinson by the Los Angeles Rams, and with Robert Woods' injury specifically late in the season and what this contract may tell us about that injury, I think it would be foolish for me to still have Robert Woods ranked ahead of A-Rob, So we're most likely going to have to be moving Robert Woods down, mainly because this signing. I don't necessarily know how much we can move Allen Robinson himself up. He'll probably go a tier above. But let me know if you think I'm being too harsh here. Let me know if you think I'm being just unfair based on the season we just had from Allen Robinson. But this is about the time you should expect those receivers to fall off anyway. Okay, so as of now, I have Allen Robinson, and we'll do this quick experiment so y'all can tell me if I am way off here, because there's a good chance I am. I have Allen Robinson in the same tier from a Dynasty fantasy football perspective as David Bell, George Pickens, Gabriel Davis, Michael Gallup, and Robert Woods. Does he not belong with those players? Is he clearly above? I don't think anybody's going to be making the argument that, oh my gosh, Mason Allen Robinson isn't worth any of those guys. I can already tell there are going to be some people in the comment section right now telling me I'm way too low on Allen Robinson. You know what? We probably have to continue to move Tyler Lockett down as well. I think, yeah, there's no way we can have Tyler Lockett a tier ahead of Allen Robinson, despite Lockett being a top 24 wide receiver for 3 seasons in a row. I mean, Tyler Lockett at that same age point, I mean, this is a receiver that is going to be playing in a much, much worse offense and still has a significant amount of target competition with DK Metcalf next to him. Okay, so Michael says a redraft, he's higher. I understand. Yes, a redraft, Allen Robinson is going to be higher than this. In redraft leagues, of course, you prefer Allen Robinson over guys like David Bell or George Pickens. That goes without saying, but he's 29 years old. This is a dynasty context, so we're going to have to be going through and adjusting just slightly. Okay, so let's go. Jasmine says Robinson versus Pickens is easy. It's Pickens 100%. Pickens is a first-round pick. No one is trading a first-round pick for Robinson. I'll agree with that. Jaden says he has 3 top 10 seasons in his career with terrible play. I completely understand, but if we go back and we look at when those seasons occurred, like I said, I'm afraid this is going to be a situation that we are paying for the name value. I'm afraid this is going to be a Sammy Watkins situation where you're paying for the name value because those seasons occurred in 2015, 2019, and I don't even want to say, I guess we can say 2020. He's 29 years old though. So really out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Allen Robinson's going into his 9th season. And out of the past 6 of those years, we've had 2 solid seasons. He's going to be 29 years old. And out of the last 6 years we've had from Allen Robinson's career, he's impressed in 2 of those. Okay. So I think we should be done with this live stream. Of course, if we have any other significant news, I will be streaming it right away. Go down there. Please drop that like, leave a comment. And of course, you can find our free rankings for the rest of the week over there on Locals. I'll spam the link in the chat if you don't want to go check out our free rankings. I really don't care. They're free. I just wanted to do it because y'all have been smashing that like button. We just passed 13,000 subscribers. But thank you again. Hope you all have a great day and hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.